If you like creative chess players who played at the very top for many years, then look no further than Bent Larsen. And not only was he creative and successful, he also had a real winner's mentality, always playing for the win with white or black, so unsurprisingly he was a fan favorite. In this game he played against Arturo Pomar, who as a youth actually got chess lessons from Alexander Alekhine, but that didn't help him out today. This game is from 1975. Pomar had white and opened with d4, and Larsen opted for the Dutch defense. As I said, Larsen was always a very combative player, so the Dutch suits him really well. White went for the somewhat offbeat knight to c3. Normally white also plays c2, c4 in the Dutch, but white wanted to prepare e2, e4. So d5 was played, clamping down on e4. But Pomar insists. He went f3, again preparing e4, and now the game gets really unusual. I guess a normal continuation would be knight to f6, simply clamping down on e4 again, and then maybe bishop to g5 to counter that, and then black could play for e6 and c5. In the game though, Larsen first played c5 right away, and after e4, the move white was playing for, he followed up with e5, and that's a pawn formation you definitely don't see every day. I get the feeling Larsen wasn't really trying to find the very best move, but the most complicated one. White can now take a pawn in a number of ways, but Pomar didn't take anything. He checked with the bishop. Taking on e5 is objectively the best move, but maybe Pomar didn't like the space-gaining move d4, although after knight to d5 it's completely fine for white. Here it could continue with knight to c6 and knight to e2, and when black wins his pawn back, knight to g3 gets out of the way of the bishop and the knight guards the e-pawn, and white has absolutely nothing to worry about. In the game, bishop b5 check by white, the bishop blocked, and after trading on d7, white did now take a pawn, but it wasn't the best move. Still white's best is to take on e5, allowing d4 again, and after knight takes e5, the bishop develops with a tempo on the knight, and white again isn't in any trouble. But Pomar didn't take the e-pawn, he went for knight takes d5, which still isn't bad, but soon you'll see the game turn in Larsen's favor. First he took on d4, and after knight to e2, preparing to castle, a trade on e4, but after Larsen developed his other knight, Pomar should have simply castled. Yes, black does get to take on d5, and then attack the pawn, but white can actually hang on to the pawn with c4, and even if black would now take en passant, after knight takes, white still protects the pawn, and black is simply worse now. In the game, however, Pomar pinned the knight with bishop to g5, which seems logical at first, but because white didn't castle, Larsen has this very strong check. And white's big problem after the bishop blocked is this queen c5 move, and now white can pretty much forget about castling, because if white does castle, then d3 comes with check, and white's losing a piece and the game. So the king is forced to stay in the middle of the board, and that usually doesn't turn out well when you're under pressure. But let's see what happens. Black also threatens to take twice on d5, so white trades on f6. Then knight to g3, good move. If white would castle right now, then d3 check doesn't lose a piece anymore. Then a typical move by Larsen, h5. When there's a knight on g3 or g6, then attacking the knight with the h-pawn is a standard move. And now, frankly speaking, white made a bad move. At this point, he could have castled safely, and if then h4, then the knight is safe on f5. It does look like the knight is trapped on f5, but after g6, actually then white can take the h-pawn, since after rook takes knight, black's knight is also hanging, and white would stand clearly better. However, for some reason, white didn't castle, instead queen f3 was played. I understand he wants to go to f5 and then infiltrate on g6 or e6, but that's not worth losing material for. Larsen played h4, kicking away one of the defenders of the e-pawn, and after knight to e2, Larsen simply took on c2, and as you can see, thanks to h4, the e-pawn is also hanging now, I'm not sure what white missed, maybe he missed h4, but black did just play h5, so really h4 was really obvious. Anyway, Pomar still went for queen to f5. Larsen took a second pawn, queen check, and after bishop e7, bishop to b4 piling up on the pinned piece, but it's still under control. Black still has knight to d5, guarding the bishop and attacking white's bishop. White traded on e7, but Larsen didn't recapture, instead he played this counter-attacking move, knight to f4, threatening with mate on e2 and taking the queen, so Pomar dropped the queen back to defend. But after king takes e7, Pomar resigned. Black has a number of threats, knight d3 check, knight takes g2 check, queen takes g2. Had white simply castled, then these threats wouldn't exist, but here we are. White can't do a lot. If king to f1, then there's simply queen takes g2 check, and queen takes rook, and it's completely resignable. And if instead king to d1, then black can go for example, knight to d3, threatening with a fork on f2 and on b2. White can try to get out of that by checking, but after king to e6 and queen c4 check, white has run out of checks, and white cannot prevent both forks. So after, for example, queen to b3, knight f2 check wins material, and especially after black also brings the rooks over, the white king is simply doomed. Well, Larsen really outclassed Pomar on this occasion. If we briefly go back, the game started out with a Dutch defense, but Larsen quickly decided to mix it up and opened with 4 pawn moves in a row, which created this tension in the center and more opportunity for white to go wrong. Pomar didn't play the opening in the best way, but at this point he still wasn't really in trouble, but that changed after this move, bishop to g5, instead of simply getting his king safe. Then Larsen got a strong initiative after queen check and queen to c5, which meant white's king remained stuck in the center. But white really messed up by going for this adventure with the queen, which immediately lost material. And it didn't take long to reach this point, and instead of recapturing on e7, Larsen went for this classy knight move and forced resignation next move. So maybe a bit one-sided, but still an instructive and entertaining win by the Great Dane. Hopefully you enjoyed the game as well. If you did, please simply like the video. I'm already working on more great games for you guys, so I'll be seeing you guys again soon, and take care.